Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of the Open Concept Podcast, where we are breaking down those unnecessary walls and barriers that stand in the way of greatness. Joining us today, Rob, Julien, Fair Market M&A. I don't know if is it Fair Market M&A? Is that how I should be referring to it as?
Just Fair Market is great.
Yeah. Fair Market.
Yeah.
Man, we had so much to talk about today. One thing that really sticks out is the M&A. Like, we have a lot of M&A conversations on this podcast, and I think it's particularly important to our audience here because, as I was talking about off air, especially in the the trades and home service based businesses, a lot of guys they're building their business. They got into it because they have a skill, right? They're starting with their hands. They feel that they can offer great service. They feel that they can start a business, feed their family. That's kind of where it starts, right? Is this idea that they want to do something a little bit better, but they never really get to a point where they're setting their business up for maximum success or have a legacy plan in place. And you're here to talk about that today. Very excited to have you. A friend of ours, Lyndon, had connected us all the way from Cochrane, and you have quite a unique history. You were mentioning offline. I'll let you tell this story about selling a school, which I thought was pretty cool. And so I want to certainly get into that. But for people that don't know who you are, would love if you could give a brief introduction of what it is that you do and what you're all about, man. And Rob, thanks for being here, brother.
Yeah, no, Brandon, thanks for having me. Maybe I won't start all the way in the beginning, but I will start right, at that school. My wife and I had built a school overseas. We were both teachers, and we ended up, when I say a school, it's not a public school in Korea. Like the English, it was in South Korea, and the English learning industry at the time was like a $50 billion industry. It's wild. And so what we had, where a lot of Canadian kids after school are going and playing sports and doing some homework and doing but some extracurricular things there, it's very competitive. And so after school, there's a lot of private schools. So they'd go to English school for an hour, they'd go to math school for an hour, maybe piano, whatever. And so we had one of those schools. It was a private English school. We built that from the ground up and ran it for 7 years. And then when it came time, we made the decision to, we're going to move to Canada. And so we went through that selling process. And quite frankly, long story short, the way I tell it is we made every mistake you can make through the process, except we did get it sold. So that was a big win. It was interesting because when I came back to Canada, I was kind of free to choose my next path. And quite frankly, I had also built an online business, and I do enjoy business, and but one thing I felt was lacking from my repertoire of skills was just direct face-to-face sales. I wanted some doors slammed in my face. I wanted that experience, and I started looking for sales jobs when I got back, just to see what I could find and see what was out there. And I ended up seeing this ad for a business broker, and I was like, I didn't even really think about that being an industry, but I really could have used someone's help as we went through that process. And so I ended up going and sitting down with the owner of that brokerage, and we hit it off right away, and we worked together for the next 5.5 years. And we had a great working relationship. Ultimately, a difference in philosophies led to kind of going our own ways. And like I said off air, right in the middle of COVID, January 2021, I fired up Fair Market. And part of that was, I will share this part of the story. I wasn't loving the work. It was feeling transactional. It was not like it for me. If there's not some purpose behind it, if I don't feel any meaning is in it, then I'm I'm out. I'll probably just drop it. No matter how much work I've put into something, I'll just drop it if I'm not loving it. And I was at that stage where I wasn't feeling great. But as we talked about, you had to put food on the table, and that's where my momentum was. I had one client that I was able to bring with me from the brokerage, and then a few others came out of the woodworks, just kind of organically. And so that's where the momentum was. And I said, you know what, I guess the sign is we're going to run with this. And ultimately, who I have, how I've found my joy and purpose in this work, and I feel I have, is working with people that, and we'll get into this, but everyone talks about maximizing value, right? And there's a few more considerations to that, but that's often the tagline you see. Well, we'll sell your business for maximum value. I'm like, that's great and all, but like for me, that's the bare minimum. Like, of course we're going to do that, but what else is important? And you can see, right, and that's the first question right on our website is, what else is important when it comes to selling? And for the people that I truly enjoy working with, and I do find again joy and purpose through the process, is people that they recognize that they've built something, and built a ton of relationships along the way, right? Their client relationships, their employee relationships, their supplier relationships for some, right? All these relationships that touch the business, and so they don't just want to sell for maximum value. Again, that's a given, but they want to find the right buyer, right? The person that's going to treat those relationships with the same respect and integrity they have, and so that's really for me, as you start getting into the little bit more nuanced goals of the process, where if you get to the finish line and you've ticked all those boxes, it's a great feeling, and to see, quite frankly, like huge hugs with clients at the end of the process, right? Like we did it, we got here, and the relationship continues, and that's I think that's the part I like most about this is it does matter, right? This is someone's well-being, and it matters to all the relationships, again, that business has touched. So that's a little bit about me.
Most people, when they're building a business, like you touched on it, man. It's they build a business around people, generally, right?
Mm-hmm.
They build a business around key people that they've at one point wanted to paint a huge future for. Those people they feel like they really do owe a lot to, and make sure that they have a place that they can continue growing. And nobody just wants to, I shouldn't say nobody, but most people that I know, most business owners that I know, if they were to sell their business, they would want to make sure that their people are well taken care of, and whoever's going to come in and take over that business isn't just somebody that's going to, chop it up and sell it off into bits and pieces, but somebody that's going to have a plan for taking care of everything that has been built to that point, right? It's like you said, it's client relations, it's supplier relations, it's team member relations. It's ultimately reputation, right? The last thing that you want to do is have this thing built that, as a business owner, you get tied up in building your identity around a brand, around a business for so long, and then you go and sell it, and you're no longer connected to that business, but your reputation of what you built still is, because there's people that are going to continue to remember the type of business that it was, and the type of person that you were, and you want to continue to have that carried out. And finding that right person for that business that is going to continue to drive that legacy forward is probably a much smaller pool, I would think, than somebody that is just going to buy it and want to start profiting from it.
It definitely shrinks the pool. I mean, I still think there's, in my experience, and maybe I've just been fortunate because I've been working with these types of clients and having these relationships. And again, even on the buyer side, the conversations I'm having, I think there's lots of people out there that care about these things and that do want, and quite frankly are purposefully, looking at this from a legacy point of view, and like, hey, we recognize what you've built, but you're right, there's lots of people out there as well, and I'm not gonna paint all of private equity with a bad brush at all. But I know for a lot of people, as they, when people go into this process, they start talking to any of their trusted advisors, and that could just be a friend, right? And so you're getting all these opinions of things, and some people do have negative stories of how things played out after a private equity deal, but again, I want to make the point of saying they're not all like that, right? And I've working on a project right now that we're almost at the end of, and we got to go into that private equity world a little bit, and it was really refreshing to see actually there are people that are trying to fit that recognize maybe that old kind of reputation and way of transitioning someone out, and kind of going in with a legacy message and saying, you know what, we recognize what you've built. We don't want to chop it up, and we want to take care of the people and take care of everything. So that, yeah, they're out there, right? Like those buyers are out there, for sure. But you're right. There's lots of on the flip side as well. So it is important to really set that message from the beginning as you go into this process.
We kind of skimmed over a big block of your life, right? Going and building this school from the ground up, as you mentioned there. So I'd like to just go back to that for a quick moment here,
Sure.
because somebody here is building a school. We built a school from the ground up, not even in our country, but like on the other side of the world. So how do you like start that process? When, like, what came up? You just saw an opportunity and decided, hey, this is something we want to go build. Let's find funding, because like a school's not cheap to build. Like, walk us through what was going on when you decided, hey, this is what we need to do: is pack up our lives, move to South Korea, build a school, and live there for a while and run this thing. Like, what was going on through your mind when you decided to do that?
Yeah, it wasn't quite that process, but I mean, I've graduated university from McMaster in Hamilton, Ontario, and had a math degree, and quite frankly, had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and I'd kind of already been, like just small little dumb things, but tutoring on my own, tutoring math, and I put out flyers to do a snow shoveling side business when I was in uni, and
Hell yeah.
as my luck would have it, it didn't. I put out the flyers, it didn't snow for 6 weeks, and then one night I was out having a great time. It might have been like 4 a.m, and the snow starts dumping, and I'm like, oh boy. And sure enough, the 6
Calls are
a.m.
coming up.
Phones ringing. But yeah, I kind of always, and I think I get this from my dad, for better or worse, is like I enjoy going out on my own and doing things my own way sometimes. And but yeah, I had made the decision. After university, I moved out here to ski for a season, and then I went to Korea, and yeah, I was just teaching there. I wanted to teach and travel. And as fate would have it, it was in my third year. So my wife is South Korean. That helped a little bit. It wasn't really necessarily about, hey, I see this opportunity. But I mean, that came eventually. My wife was also teaching, and she was basically she was basically the GM of her school. And I'll save some of the details. But as far as I was concerned and was finding out, I didn't really appreciate the way she was being treated by the owner of that school. And I was like, I'm a teacher, you're a teacher, like, and you're running your school. Why don't we do this together? And again, it's a little bit of a different world, right? When you think school, it's not public school, so it's a smaller building. I mean, we still had capacity. We maxed out at probably 170 students, so it's not small either. But it's a little different. Like, I guess where I'm going is, you can start in Korea, like it's normal to have a school in an apartment. It translates to a study room. And so that's what we did. And my hypothesis was correct, which was like, you're running your school. They're there because of you. I'm sure of this. And we went, when it's just the two of us in an apartment. That was the thing. In an apartment, you couldn't hire other teachers. It's just, it's just you, basically like running a sole proprietor almost, proprietorship. And, yeah, but we ballooned from 0 to 60 students in a month. And that was because as soon as my wife walked out the door, everyone was like, where are you? And what are you doing? And when she said the story of like, oh, I just married my husband, and he's Canadian, he's a teacher, we're setting up this school. And yeah, people like right away are just there. So we went to capacity in about a month.
Wow.
And then it was a year later where I was kind of, there's still aspects I love about teaching, and I actually even educating, as you do in a podcast, and I'm sure in other ways. There's still a major education portion to the work I do, right? Even right now, just talking about this stuff. And so I still, I love education in a lot of ways. But I didn't really want to be the teacher anymore. And so we did have to graduate from that study room to a proper school. And that's where we did raise some funds, and we literally had the building gutted and built, and all the leasehold improvements done. And yeah, we fired it up, and that way we could hire some other teachers, and I could step out. And I was far more interested in the business development side of things, the marketing. I did have an online business I was building at the same time. we don't have to go into this one, but it was teaching the Korean language to other expats who wanted to learn the Korean language. I actually still
Oh
have it
yeah.
going. It's yeah, neat little side hustle. But yeah, I mean, so then we ran the school for the next 7 years and had 6 teachers and 2 bus drivers, and it just, yeah, it was a great time.
I love that. So saw a problem that was a real problem in your life and in your wife's life and in your family's life, and decided to make a change, right? So you decided we can do this better, we can do this differently, we can build something great. Took a chance, gambled on yourselves, paid off, and eventually you ended up selling selling the school, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so how did you find the buyers at that time for? Real quick before we get back to the show, if you have heard anything on this podcast that has resonated with you, or if it's helped you in any way, appreciate more than anything in the world if you could go hit that subscribe button or leave us a review. It helps us tremendously. I want to go back to being able to continue to serve and do more and more and help out and get bigger and bigger guests on, better and better. The only way that I can do that is with your help. I'm so honored to be here. Let's get back to the show. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. The school, was it just a for sale sign on the front door? What did that look like?
No, I mean, that's the unique thing about this, and there's quite a few differences. People, like the simple way I describe what I do to people, just as an analogy for their brains to kind of start understanding it, is like we're like real estate brokers, but for operating companies, and that's the simplest way to put it. But the reality is, it's actually very, very different. And the reason for that is that, if you sell you sell a building and you hand over the keys and walk out the door, the walls don't fall down, right? But if you sell a business and you hand over the keys and you walk out the door without any transition and all of these things that are required to be in place, it's very likely the business will cease to exist, right? It can almost happen on day one, depending on your role in the business. And I share that story because it's an important piece we'll come to. But so yeah, we had to go. We were in a really small town, and again, we had built a reputation, right? Like we went into this. I shared that it was a $50 billion industry, and what that attracts is a lot of businessmen who actually didn't give a shit about, excuse my French, about education, right? They're there for the dollars. They wanted butts and seats, and we were education first. We started. That was our message. That's how we hired people. That's how we brought some talent on that we knew, we had our eye on some specific teachers that are, great friends still today. And we wanted them, and we went with this focus. We went with this vision of like, yes, the numbers are important. Of course, you need to make that make sense. Otherwise this all falls apart. But we're education first, right? And so that was our message. And then, so reputation really became important. We were in a small town, so it had to be done confidentially, right? And most of the clients I work with today still want that confidentiality, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we didn't really know. Again, this was our first time through the process. We did not know what we were doing, how to find these people. We had to almost, whisper in, back closets to, hey, do you know anyone? Do you know someone, like, because you couldn't put that sign on the lawn, right? And you couldn't even really say, hey, we've got a school for sale, and keep it confidential, because we were in such a small town that as soon as we shared any details, people would know exactly who we were. We were fairly unique. So, yeah, it was challenging. We did end up finding a potential buyer, and we got to the table, and they had us down, quite frankly, to the lowest number we were willing to accept. We weren't crazy about it. We were sitting at the table, had the documents in front of us, and they dropped at another $10,000. They pulled out this one little fact. They're like, oh, well, what about this? And, we're knocking $10,000 off. And we had to sit there, because I actually had given my wife and I a timeline. I said, like, this is done by August 2014, because I actually had one of my best friend's wedding was in August of 2014, and I wanted to be back in Canada for that. And I said, this is our timeline. Like, yeah. And we were, I can't remember exactly how many months out now, but maybe 8-ish. Enough that it was a tough decision sitting at that table. And, my wife said, listen, I trust whatever you decide here. It was not easy, but I said, you know what? Stuff it. We're not signing. And we walked away, and it was like, oh my God, what do we do now? Because it had taken us a little bit to find that buyer. And, as fate would have it, and this topic matters to anyone looking to sell, we started looking strategically. Well, who does this business make sense to? Mm. And we end up selling to this person that was already running a kindergarten. And so we didn't touch kindergarten classes. Some schools did. That wasn't our bread and butter, but we did, grade 1 and up, basically to the end of middle school, very little high school and a little bit of adults. But our focus was grade 1 up to basically grade 8. And so for her, it kind of fit perfectly. She had the kindergarten, and then kids were going to enter into grade 1, and it was just a natural transition. So that's who I ended up selling the school to. It was, I still feel, there was there was some fate stepping in, and a little bit of grace helping us through that process and getting it done. But yeah, it was kind of cool. Last couple of years ago, my wife tries to go back every year, and I try every couple of years. A couple of years ago, we were there, and school's still there. It's in a different location, but still there and thriving. And it was cool to see.
Well, I think an important thing to touch on is there's different versions of private equity, right? People hear private equity and they're assuming this is a big firm that's coming in and a ton of lawyers just swarming over and reviewing everything and just like ripping businesses apart. And that's not necessarily the truth, because private equity could be a single operator. It could be a mother husband combo. It could be any combination of people that are really just looking to buy a business to start to operate. Right? They see a niche. They don't want to go through the hurdles necessarily of starting a business from the ground up. They would rather be able to take a business and audit it. And it may be, a single operator that comes in versus a huge entity, but that could also be defined as private equity because it's private money.
If you want to look at the, kind of literal sense of private equity, then sure. I mean, the private equity label is kind of saved for, like you described, those kind of bigger entities that are, looking at, and again, the size of business is also changing, that, where they focus, but, and, the lawyers and the people that are ripping apart the numbers, like that's a thing. And I would save that for the term private equity. But you're right. I mean, it is still private equity and private funds that are coming in. I mean, I might, the person just looking over take over a business, I might just call them a solo investor or a individual investor. But then you've got strategic, right? When I use the word strategic, it's more about who's related to your business, right? Who's already doing something related to your business that they can either bolt this on, they're adding on horizontally or vertically, right? I mean, that's a little bit more when I use the word strategic. But you're right. You could use it's still a private sale for sure in that sense, but. Mm-hmm.
But I love what you said too about, finding that right avatar, finding that right person who would be the buyer for this, rather than just trying to find anyone, and finding somebody that was already vertically aligned, sort of in the same industry. They may have a great opportunity to either take this over or bolt this onto something that they're already doing. But that was a great move, was finding that right person, identifying who that correct buyer could be, and targeting that individual.
Like I say, we got a lot of things wrong through the process, but we got some things right. Yeah. No, that was one of them for sure. And it wasn't just, it made sense from a business point of view. Just talking with the person, again, the people that, pulled that negotiation trick the last minute, like, it just gave you like vibes, like this is not even the right buyer, right? Like there's not a right feeling here. But this other buyer was, right? Like, she ran a kindergarten, right? She was a pretty soft-hearted person and, easy to talk to, deal with. And yeah, it just all went pretty smoothly from there. I do love that part. It doesn't happen every single time, but I've been fortunate. It happened most times, but when you get that right buyer, like it's almost like, there's almost just a feeling right in the beginning. It's like, there's something about this one that, it feels right. And it doesn't always mean it's going to be the buyer. But when it is, it just makes everything more smooth. And something I do want to touch on that you brought up that is so important. And this is, tactically, strategically part of the process. But yeah, it is, this process for me, from my point of view, is most successfully done when you do a lot of the heavy lifting up front. Meaning you get very, very clear. This is where evaluation comes into play. It's not, for me, it's not just about the number. Like, of course, that's a thing people want, and you get that range of value. Here's our reasonable range of value that we think the business is worth. But what's way more important is what's driving that value, right? What's limiting it? What are the opportunities? What are the strengths here? Like the whole story of this business. What is the culture holding this team together? Like what? And then it starts to tie into, well, what kind of buyer should buy this? Because, so I'm actually helping someone sell a physio clinic right now. and they know the culture that they've built their business on. It's very hands-on. There's a kind of a new model of a little bit more like quicker in and quicker out, and seeing more people and using all these modalities and machines to increase ROI. And they've always kind of stayed away and said we are patient care, first. And if the modalities make sense and they're science backed, then yes, but they'll be very careful about bringing those in. And so there's kind of these two schools of thought happening in the physio world as I'm learning. And yeah, if someone comes from the other school of thought, like, it'll be the riskiest buy you ever see, because the entire staff will walk out, right? Like, everyone will, like, they just won't deal with it, right? And so it does matter, right? All these details start to tailor, well, who should buy this? Now, it doesn't mean you only have one avatar. You can have multiple, right? You can have that strategic purchase, that person that's already in the industry, running a business that's related. Like, from a financial sense, that typically makes the most sense. Theoretically, they should be able to pay more because they'll probably have cost synergies they can build in and all these things. It doesn't play out that way all the time. But then, yeah, you can look at the just solo investor, the person that wants to just buy a business for their family, right? I had a guy from Turkey who bought a company, moved his family out from Ontario, and just they were looking for an IT company, and they were looking for it with these certain values. And he was a perfect example of when we started talking. It's like, man, there's something about this, like, this has legs. When we finally started talking seriously, it took us a little bit to get to that stage, but yeah, I mean, he was super pumped. He moved his family out across the country and bought this business. But yeah, my point is, there's so many details, and when you do them up front and you do them right, it sets the stage for success through the rest of the process. The last thing you want to do is go down the road with the wrong buyer and you get to the 11th hour. I've seen deals fall apart. Knock on wood, it hasn't really happened with Fair Market, which is nice. I mean, not to say it hasn't happened, but we've kind of been able to get them back on track a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the last thing you want is to go down that road. It's tons of time and thousands of dollars and legal and, accounting expense and all these things. And then the deal falls apart. Like, well, and then I've seen examples where it's just the wrong buyer, right? Or things were not declared up front and they were found later. Or, there's so many things that can kill a deal that you just want to be, again, have all your information straight, know who you're going after, know the values that you're, who, again, from a values perspective, who you're looking for, from a skills perspective, who you're looking for. And the more clear you are up front, I think just the smoother the process as you go through it. So
what do people typically get wrong when they're considering selling their business? Like, what is, and we're talking about, if you can picture, SMBs, small, medium-sized businesses that are considering selling, right? So maybe they are, maybe they've just had enough, right? Maybe they're a little burnt out. They don't want to do it anymore. Maybe they are, they're looking to retire, but they don't really have a legacy plan, and they've decided, I like the idea, actually, instead of shutting this down, let's go to market and see if anybody's interested. What do they typically get wrong when they decide that they want to take a business to market in the first place? Is it more they just don't have good financial data to back things up? They don't have their financials, third party audited and ready to review? Is it they haven't prepped the team and had that discussion with, hey, we might sell the company? Or what are people typically getting wrong when they decide that they want to?
The team one is interesting, and that's I think another discussion, because a lot of people, I'd say most cases for me, people are not telling the team until they're kind of forced to, and ideally after the deal's done. So I'll leave that one. But I think the biggest mistake that people make, and this is very general, and you've touched on some examples as to why, is just waiting too late to think about this stuff. Like, not thinking about this. Like, people think, okay, I'm ready to retire. And I understand it, because, in business we have, and everyone's at a kind of a certain stage in their business and what their role is in their business. But for a lot of people, they're busy in some capacity in the day to day. They do have fires that they're fighting, and their minds on all these things. And so they're like, yeah, you know what, I'll deal with that later. I'm not ready to sell yet. I'm not ready to retire. I'm not ready for that yet. But that is the mistake, because by the time you do say, okay, I'm ready, usually, like, you're actually mentally ready, and it means your energy is not there to like start doing some of the things that you should have done to improve your value and your saleability. There was a stat that was thrown out by the Exit Planning Institute in 2013. They did a survey of a lot of business owners who had sold, and the stat was that of all businesses that were brought to market, 80% did not sell. Now they may have since put a qualifier on that, like had sold within a certain time frame, but the reality is a lot of businesses don't sell, and that is alone like detrimental. I would say to anyone who is listening to this right now, like for most business owners, again, we're not working for the government. We don't have this massive pension that's, waiting for us at retirement. So we got to kind of build that ourselves, right? And so for most business owners, the business itself, the saleable asset, this entity that we have, the equity that we have in it, is our most valuable piece of our life, right? And whether people acknowledge it or not, they're often relying on, and my dad was a perfect example of this, but relying on the sale of the business to fund their retirement, to fund that lifestyle. And no one wants to have to like kind of take shortcuts in retirement and live, for lack of a better term, a lesser life than they're used to because they did not plan for this. But the reality is, it happens. Like, people don't realize, actually, they think, oh, I've put 20 years into this. They have this idea of what this thing is worth, but they don't actually ever figure it out. And the worst part of what I do, the job I do, is telling someone what I think their business is worth, and having a major discrepancy between what they thought it was worth and what they need it to be worth. Like, I don't ever, when I'm doing evaluation, I don't ever ask someone prior to doing all my work what they think or hope it's worth. But once I've done all my work and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to go through all of my findings, I don't just hand over a report, like give a number. Again, that's, for me, that's a waste of time, everyone's time. It's like, how did I get to the number I got to? And I want people to understand. I want people to take knowledge away from this. And so I'll go, but right before I go through all of that, that's when I will ask them and say, what do you think this is worth? And the hardest part is when, someone has this number and I know we are miles apart. And I always tell people, I'm happy to be wrong, but this is what I do. And I don't just do valuations. I see them through the process. So we actually get validation on them, and, and you kind of tweak and go from there. So I'm happy to be wrong, but, compared to someone who actually really doesn't know how we're arriving anywhere, doesn't know much about this process, it's probably more likely that I'm right than they are. And it's just, it's the hardest piece to deliver that news. And so, the biggest mistake is just waiting too long, because there are things you can do to build both value and saleability into your business, right? And there's some low-hanging fruit that's easy to do. And then there's some longer-term strategies. And then there's the tax considerations, right? Like, none of us want to give more money than we have to the government, right? Like, no one is putting their hand up to do that. And so, I don't know if you're familiar, Brandon, with the capital gains lifetime exemption that we have here in Canada.
Tell us a little bit about that.
For sure. And so, essentially, different than the U.S., we have this in Canada, where if you sell the qualifying shares, and now, depending on when someone's listening, these rules are kind of always changing depending on government whim. But if you sell the qualifying shares of your business, then you can qualify for up to and the last I heard the number was like $1.25 million in tax-free capital gains, which is hundreds of thousands of dollars difference for a business owner, right? And so, and when you say qualifying, this is where I'm not going to get, the details. I'll kind of give some high level, but I'm not a tax accountant. I like to stay in my lane, let those people do their work. But I do suggest to anyone listening, if they're even close to thinking about selling, go and figure this out with your accountant. Figure out whether you qualify right now, because if you don't, the main rule that I'm getting to is that it requires, you need to be in a qualifying state for 2 years. And so that's a minimum of 2 years you need to be thinking about this, right? Yeah. And then again, if you're not qualifying, you've got to do some things to start qualifying. It's not difficult. It's actually mostly around how clean is your business? Is it mostly like 90% operating assets? And there's just a ratio of what the government sees as operating assets versus non-operating assets.
Yeah.
And so cleaning that up, there's a few other things, but it's not difficult work, but you just need to know it, and you need to know it soon enough, right? Again, come to me now and say, hey, I want to sell. Well, if you don't qualify, there's not much I can do, right? Like, and so that's one example of the timeline. And then, as you know, Brandon, like working on any business development takes time, right? Like you got some lower hanging fruit that you can do quickly. You can maybe get your bookkeeping system a little bit more dialed in, a little bit more nuanced, and you got, better financial metrics and financial reporting. That can be done relatively quick and should be done, quite frankly. Buyers are going to ask you, hey, can you give me a breakdown of revenue by service? Can you give me a breakdown of gross margin by service? All these things. You should have these in there, and they're not that difficult to do. So, that's an example of something you can do quicker. But as we know, there's, bigger, more valuable strategic changes over time. Diversifying your product or services, diversifying your client base, like all these things can take time, right? And they don't only take time to do, but from a valuation perspective, they take time to show up, the results to show up in your financials, right? And often people are looking at the history of your business. Buyers are buying the future, but they're looking at the history of your business, the past, to support the story for the future. And so it takes time just to get those changes into your books and into your business, right? That they show up. So that's the biggest first mistake people make. There are three that I have on my head, but I don't know if you want to pause there if you have any questions about that one first, or just keep rolling.
Oh, I do want to know what the third one is. You can't just leave me hanging like that. But I do want to make a comment. Like you had mentioned, what you do essentially is like you were kind of joking and saying we're sort of like real estate brokers, but for corporations. But that's like that story of the sense the seller putting a certain valuation or a belief perceived value on their business, similar to their home, and having the real estate agent come in and saying it's actually not worth $2 million, right? It's probably worth 1.2 in this market. And here's all the reasons why. And similar to you, where it's like, business isn't worth 10 million. Maybe it's worth 800 grand, something along those lines, right? But that's breaking that news to a buyer, because if you've been operating a company for 20 years, right? You've put heart, soul, sweat, blood, tears, like everything into your business, and to hear that at the end of the day, when you go to sell it, it's actually not worth all that much to anybody but you. That's a pretty tough pill to swallow. Breaking that news to somebody's got to be tough. But I agree with you. Like I know a lot of guys that have, they're operating the business. They've talked about selling, but you look at it and there's just no way, because there's a lot of things that with the experience that I have, I can look at and say right away, like this would disqualify probably 99% of buyers. Maybe you find somebody that, is okay with the fact that literally everything runs through your head. If they're planning on keeping you on and giving you a job for the next 3 years as a part of the deal, as a part of the acquisition. But most people, they don't want to really stick around after they sell. They're kind of like, they've kind of checked out at that point. But are there things that would be detractors? Like I did went up and I visited Alex Hormozy at acquisition.com, and I did a workshop with him and Layla and the Hormozy team and the acquisition.com team. And they were talking about when they're evaluating businesses, right? And they're looking at hundreds of businesses a month, right? They have a whole team that's looking at businesses to potentially acquire and put in their portfolio companies. And they were talking about, here's the things that add value in a business and things that typically detract value in a business, right? That might be, are you geographically tied, right? Is it a local based business? So is your total addressable market, quite small? Maybe that's going to be a detractor. One of the things that they identified was what they were referring to as key man risk, right? So is it you have, one employee that the whole business is built around, that if they left, the business would not be able to operate, or maybe two key people that if those people upped and left because they got a better offer, or they left because the owner decided that they wanted to sell and the only reason that they were there was because of the owner in the first place, then that would have massive negative implications on the business after it changed hands. But I'd be curious to know on your part, like what are what are key things that would drive the value of a business down? Would it be simple like just lack of leads? Is it they don't have a marketing engine and everything is built off of referrals? Does that even matter? But what comes to mind when I ask you what would typically detract the value of a company?
Yeah, for sure. And again, you've already provided some examples, and there are a lot. The way I'm going to start with a very general perspective, like the general concept of value is value equals generally the reward. In this case, we'll call it the earnings of a business divided by risk, right? And that's more. It's a more of a concept than it is just an actual formula. Like we don't have an how do you get a number for risk? Well, I mean, that's what the multiple ends up being right now. Again, I know in that when you're using a multiple, you're multiplying it, but the reality is we know we can increase the value of a business by increasing the earnings, right? Like relative to the same business with less earnings. But the flip side of the equation, or the other piece of the equation that is more important and drives exactly what you're asking about, is the risk piece. Mm. The less risk you have, the more valuable something is. And again, it's not just value, but saleability, right? The goal is actually not value, but transferable value. What can you actually successfully transfer to someone else, right? And again, this goes back to the difference between commercial real estate and an M&A advisor or business broker, is that when the owner walks out of a business, as you've touched on, for so many businesses, depending on the role of that owner in the business and the relationships they have, the whole thing could cease to work, right? And it only takes one aspect of the business ceasing to work for the whole thing to fall apart, right? I mean, I think about, people always ask me, oh, have you ever done an evaluation on my business, on my type of business? I'm like, well, sometimes I have to say, well, no, but I've done evaluation on all sorts of different businesses. And I don't necessarily word it this way, but the reality is I think 80-90% of all businesses through a certain lens are the same. And then there's there's that final 10 to 20% nuance that might be different industry to industry, business to business. But when I say they're the same, what I mean is they all have the same business functions. We have this product and service that we decide we're going to put out to the world. And then we start doing marketing to get the word out about that product or service. And then hopefully we're having conversations. We have a sales mechanism to then convert, conversations and interest into actual business. And then you have a fulfillment function where you have to now fulfill on the promises you made through that sales and marketing process. And then you have your financial reporting, hopefully, where you're, recording all this. And the goal is to just run as many people through that as possible, and increase transaction size, and you get referrals and all the other things with business. But every business runs through these same functions, and the goal is to look at, well, where is there risk in any of these functions, right? And so if you want to look at the sales and marketing piece you mentioned, well, if you only have one marketing channel and it goes away, like look at when Donald Trump banned TikTok from the US for 24 hours, there was a lot of people that are like, oh my God, I don't have a business anymore, right? They had one channel. And so, the diminishing power of one is something I often talk about. It's a concept you can apply to your suppliers, again, it's a key man risk, right? If you only have one key person, then if they go away, what happens, right? That's the question to ask. If this goes away, what happens, right? And if this marketing channel goes away, if we have this one alpha sales guy and he goes away, like he's a rainmaker, awesome, like our business is booming. But if he leaves, what happens, right? And so it's where you mentioned our mutual friend Lyndon, like, the work he does with systems and operations, it's where that stuff really starts to matter. I haven't even touched on the biggest one. We have talked around it the whole time, but it's the owner, right? Like the thing that I tell people is the more valuable. If I ever had a writer downer in my life, I think this is it.
Everybody get your pens out if you don't have.
That's right. Get it sharpened. The more valuable you are to your business, the less valuable your business is to you, from a sales perspective, and from a business development perspective, people can be like, well, that's crazy. I'm the one making this all happen. I came up with the dream. I've built this team. I've done all the things. From that perspective, absolutely, you are the most important person. But from a buyer's perspective, again, assuming you're walking out the door, what happens to this thing, right? And so the more valuable you are to your business, the less valuable it is to you, because the risk goes up. The risk that the value is not going to transfer, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really the name of the game. And you start looking at all those functions I mentioned. It's where you start looking at client concentration, right? That's a big piece they're looking at. So if you have, two or three clients that are driving a large majority of your revenues, well, the same question. Well, when the owner goes, do those relationships go, right? And if those go, then what are we left with? Like nothing, right? The value's gone. And so this is where it's very different from commercial real estate, right? Like, how do you make sure everything transfers? How do you make sure this entire thing, again, maybe the team like has this culture built, as we've already talked about, this has this culture built, and you bring someone in that's a totally different culture, and I'm not using words good or bad, it's just different, right? And maybe they're like, yeah, you know what, I've been thinking about a career change anyways, this might be the time, and they're gone, right? And so how do you it goes to that key man risk. How do you make sure that they're not so key, right? And that's, again, ties back to systems, I think, and processes for that particular piece. How do you get someone that can get great results? It's almost the McDonald's model, right? Like you can take a 17-year-old pimply kid and they can do the job well enough because they have the systems built in, right? Like there is no key man risk in that role, right? And I know I'm speaking kind of conceptually here, but I think that's the idea in all aspects of our business. Where is there risk that it falls apart if someone leaves or if something changes? That's what you need to look at.
I was going to say the McDonald's model works for everybody except for few handful of people, including myself, who was fired from McDonald's as one of their first jobs and didn't quite make the McDonald's team material. I couldn't really dip the fries and deal with all the beeping and stuff. So I was unfortunately let go from McDonald's.
I was similar. I was a Wendy's guy, and so in Wendy's, when I don't know if it's still the same, I assume so, but if you like slightly overcook a burger, and it's not servable, then it goes into the chili meat. And I we had this deal, I'm jumping sideways here, but had this deal that you had to have it out the drive-through window in 30 seconds or it was free. And so you got to like guess how many burgers I got to have on here. And again, a 17-year-old pimply kid, I had no idea what I was doing. I was burning burgers all over the place, tons of chili meat, got the axe. And then sure enough, like right after I'm done, chili goes on sale nationwide for 99 cents, and my family has never let me live it down.
There you go. You're the driver.
That's right.
Probably a pretty good contributor to the avenue of Wendy's Nation. I love it, man. If you are looking to buy a business, this episode is sponsored by New Vision Projects, and everybody has heard the horror stories that happen. They have a friend of a friend or a neighbor that's been renovating for years on end, or they've been building a home and it just hasn't gone the way that it needed to go. Budgets are blown through the roof, timelines, forget about them. New Vision Projects has an incredibly strong track record for over 15 years of working with customers, serving them at the highest level. If you are considering building or renovating, check them out on Instagram at New Vision Projects or at newvisionprojects.com. Building the homes you want with the confidence you need. New Vision has you covered. Let them show you why they're different. Back to the show.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you're on the other side, right? You're not looking to sell a business. You're looking to buy a business. And I think it's probably going to be very different for everybody, depending on your tolerance. But to me, it naturally seems like if you are going to purchase a business, something that you can vertically integrate into your own business versus buying a totally different business that maybe you don't understand, or maybe it's looks good, feels good, in the time, but maybe you can't add a lot of value to it. But for instance, I have a construction company. Right. Mm-hmm. If I'm not necessarily going to go out and start a peptide, distribution company just because I'm interested in health and fitness.
Right.
But because I wouldn't really know where to start. Right. But if you are looking to buy a business, how do you become an attractive buyer to somebody that is looking to sell a business? Do you approach them usually, and is it are you a few degrees separated where you never really get the face-to-face with the owner of the business? Is it a good idea to go and knock on the door and shake hands and just say, hey, just interested, if you're curious about selling your business, this would be an awesome idea and here's why. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing to do? Do you absolutely need to let the professionals, the brokers, go at it first? But if you're looking at acquiring a business, what should you be thinking about
Mhm.
when you're considering approaching different businesses?
Yeah. Now, full disclosure, like most of my work is on the sell side, right? I have
Yeah.
done a little bit on the buy side for sure. And so, I almost maybe a bit of a biased answer answering from the lens of working on the sell side, but I'm always looking. My job is to look for kind of green flags. My job is to look for, is this person serious, right? And so, and again, a couple different scenarios I think that you're kind of inquiring about, because in this scenario, I've got this business for sale, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm already marketing it. So that kind of understanding is already established, where, there's another scenario that you're alluding to, which is just cold calling an owner like, "Hey, have you thought about selling your business?" And this is happening a lot because everyone knows there's a $1 trillion wealth exchange happening right now that, they quoted in 2023, I think over the next decade, $1 trillion is going to
Silver
transfer. And so,
tsunami. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. And so, you know, people are getting phone calls all the time, right? So there is this, almost people getting a little bit tired of it. I think, there's this like, oh God, someone else is calling. So yeah, how do you stand out? I mean, something I think people have to realize and recognize is that, there are yeses out there. There are people looking to sell. So, like, yes, in some ways it should be a volume play. Like, have as many conversations as you can. But I think for me, again, it comes back to like values, and it's not just the values of the business owner, but what are the values of you, right? Like, what do you care about? What do you recognize that they care about, and how do you find that match, right? Like, so I find, again, I mentioned some people that are kind of in the quote unquote private equity world that we came to find, like, they were a breath of fresh air. They're pushing this legacy play, just had this totally different message. And so they had this entire profile built about him and his partner and kind of their background, but it was really built around that legacy message, right? And so it stands out, because the client I've been working with, like, that mattered. And we didn't want to just have a conversation with anyone. So when I, read this profile, I was like, yeah, this is a person worth talking to, right? It's kind of like the who are you, and then there's the ability, like, does this person have the ability? So I think the quicker you can kind of establish that, hey, we're a serious buyer, and then that also comes to, some people are willing to share how much, kind of investment equity they have to put into a deal, and some people are a little bit more closed about that. But then there's other organizations that'll kind of verify buyers, and all those steps you can take to kind of show, hey, we are serious, I think matter. I think they open up the door a little bit easier, because again, like, people don't tell family members about the inner workings of their business and how much money they make, right? Like, it's a very private thing. So just to open the kimono to any stranger who asks is like, it's, there's sensitivity there, and I think acknowledging that, but again, that's where I think I start speaking from my bias, right? If you got someone, a wholly transactional business owner who just wants to unload something, and you have a wholly transactional buyer, and that's what they care about, that's their values, that's fine, but that's their values. So establish that, right? If that's what you care about, put that in the message, right? And try to find that person who cares about that same thing. For me, that's like, you're just looking for the match, right?
Yeah.
Looking
Yeah.
for someone who's genuine, not just, again, it's that old term, the tire kickers, right? Trying to just kind of weed that out. That's part of my job on behalf of my clients, is to only bring the serious conversations and have that. Now, the next thing I will say, the next layer. So again, this is more of the scenario of, we got a business listed, right? We've always got a CIM. Again, I talked about the process. You do a lot of that heavy work up front. Well, we create a package that really, sells the story of this business, and not just the numbers, but the intangibles and the values and all this thing. And does a lot of the heavy lifting. Someone signs an NDA, we're going to send that to them and say, hey, check this out. It's usually kind of 20 to 30 pages, right? Like, my philosophy is information up front. Like, don't hide anything. Talk about the mistakes. The third one, we didn't do the second one yet either, but the third one is people like thinking they're going to hide their weaknesses, hide their mistakes, hide their blemishes. Man, put those up front. Like, those should be, because people don't take buying a business lightly. I don't care the size of business. Usually the amount that someone's investing is a significant portion of what they can invest. And like, they don't take it lightly. They're going to do their due diligence, and they will probably find it.
Yeah.
If you leave it to them to find something, trust gets eroded. immediately elicits the question, well, what else are they hiding? And trust is gone. If trust is gone, the deal is done. So I think putting everything up front, disclosing and actually proactively building trust from the beginning when you do that, right? Like, and when you get into due diligence, it's not, oh, what are they going to find? It's like, hey, what you guys are going to find is everything we've stated. And every time they turn over a rock and they look underneath it and they find what you have stated, it builds trust over time. You're building that momentum towards a close because it will be emotional. I know I'm kind of going off on a few different tangents here to get back to this question, but the CIM, one of the green flags I'm looking for is when someone gets that CIM, well, they read it and they actually ask pointed questions, right? If I'm just getting a bunch of questions and it shows, well, that was in the CIM, this one was in the CIM, they clearly didn't read it, they're just giving me their bag of questions. Well, that's a red flag for me, right? A green flag is they read it, they understood it, they had pointed questions, and now I know someone's starting to invest their time. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a green flag, right? You're always just kind of looking for green flags. But I think, yeah, again, from the buyer's point of view, I think these are the things you can do to build those green flags and get your foot in the door.
Love it. I think one of the most uh, one of the biggest opportunities that people have that often get overlooked, and it's maybe not right for everybody, but but selling the business to your employees,
Hmm.
right? If you have some key staff that love the idea, they've been there for a while, they maybe want to step into that owner's role. There's a really good opportunity there. I'd like if you could speak on that a little bit because I know that there are really great instances where owners have decided to step out and their play was to not go to private equity. Their
Hmm.
play was to transfer that equity to staff members that have been around for a long time, that have shown promise, that have shown a drive to really want to step up, move into the company, and can structure that sale in a really unique way where maybe the employees they come with a bit of a down payment that's maybe funded from, if you're here in Canada, maybe it's the BDC or a bank, but also can fund the rest of the buyout based on profit over the next handful of years to
Hmm.
the owner. And that's a really unique opportunity that I think gets overlooked by a lot of owners when they're considering exiting, because maybe there's a limited belief there that those people don't want to be invested in the business, or that they're going to get upset, or they don't want to have that conversation too early on because maybe there's fear that the owner is going to be leaving. So there's probably a really good opportunity there in a lot of cases to look internally as to who may be a good candidate for a purchase of this business. Would you mind speaking on that a little bit? You
Yeah,
have
and if I'm being honest, like, so I've never actually gone through the process to facilitate a transaction like that.
Mm.
And so, I don't even know how much more I can add to what you've already described, but you're right. Like it can make a ton of sense, right? I mean, because you're eliminating some of the unknowns, right? Like when a buyer comes, well, there's unknowns from the buyer's perspective. There's a ton of unknowns about the business, right? But they know their target. They're going to dive in with their questions. From a seller's perspective, like, well, who is this person? And all the
Mm.
questions you ask, and all the things again, the values you try to establish, the ability. Does this person have the ability to run our business? Are they actually going to carry on with these values? Or are they just going to change things right out of the gate? Like, you can ask these questions, but there's still an unknown, right? Like there is a total unknown. This guy was a stranger yesterday, so how much do you know? And I think an employee piece that's all eliminated, right? The team has the ability. Already know the values. What's there. So I think it makes a ton of sense. But you're right. There's a sensitive nuance there of, well, shit. How do I ask without telling, my intention here of selling? But, the reality is I think everyone just has to assess on their own, like their team. That physio clinic I mentioned, they actually did go to some of their key people and said, hey, and, again, like people know, like, we're all on this earth for a finite amount of time. When someone's hitting a certain age, like the writing is on the wall, right? Like, so, you can kind of leverage that and to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. Do you have any interest? And, I think it's a great play when it makes sense. And I think you're right. There's some assumptions people build in, like, oh, that person wouldn't want to run it. But, it really is just an individual's kind of discretion, right? On their own. They know their people, they know but I think it is worth exploring for sure.
Well, and they know the weaknesses that you're talking about, right? They probably know some of the nuances, the things that aren't going really well because they've been a part of it, right? They've
Hmm.
seen it.
Yeah.
They've seen it not work in the business, and they probably in their mind have this idea of, if I was to run things, I would do it differently. I would do it this way because I see it from this perspective because I've been in it. I've been doing the thing.
Yeah.
Um, and they haven't had that opportunity to really step up. So I would encourage people too to really consider that, right? Maybe
I think it's
who
very
on
worth.
your team
Yeah.
could take this over and continue that legacy, because if they've been around for a while, they probably have they're probably well known in the community. They're known as number two or number three in the company,
Hmm.
and they want to see the business succeed. They really do want to grow it.
Yeah.
And I've seen a handful of transactions happen in that direction, just locally out here in the Vancouver area that I'm familiar with. So wanted to touch upon that.
Yeah, no, I think it makes total sense to consider and strongly consider. Yeah, I don't see a downside. Like, the only downside is, yeah, you now kind of, you know, tell and give insight into where you're at and that you are thinking of selling. I mean, that's a piece that people often go back and forth on. Should I tell people? Should I not? I have varying opinions on that. With our school, when we sold it, we told everyone.
Yeah.
And we did it with, really, my general thoughts are like, as we know, when human beings are allowed to imagine, and we imagine the worst case scenario, oh my God, who are they going to sell it to? Is it going to be totally different? Like, the longer people have to like play these scenarios out, I think that I usually encourage people, like, if you don't feel you have to tell people, don't yet. We're going to try to find the right person in the background. That's what we're going to be doing. But if you are going to tell them, then, and this is what we did, we led with that. We said, listen, like, this is what we're doing. But we want to acknowledge, like, for the school in particular, like, this is how we built the school. We understand, like, everyone is a big part of this. These are the values we've had, and we're going to try to find the right buyer that takes this over. Like, that's our goal too. So, but we want to let you know. And we did that because we knew we were kind of touring people through the school, and we're like, this is looking awkward. So we decided to tell. But, clients can kind of go back. Most clients I work with don't end up telling till the end. And then it's like, again, you've kind of, and it really depends on how key those people are, right? So they're going through a truck parts distributor sale right now, and there are some key managers that are an important piece of this whole thing. I mean, if those managers weren't sticking around, then who knows what happens to this. And that was also from both sides. From my client's point of view, like, they were also the people that he wanted to see taken care of through this, and so there was a need to have that conversation prior to a close, right? There was a need to say, hey, this is what's happening. We wanted to bring you in, and there's an upside here for you as well, right? And so, interestingly enough, those discussions are going on today.
Love it.
Yeah.
Rob, thank you so much for spending some time here with us today. Are there any parting messages that, if you were to leave to anybody, that is, if they could hear, one thing that you wanted to leave in their minds if they're considering selling their business, before we go today, is there any last piece of advice that you would give them?
There is, and I don't want to end on a dark note, but I might. Like, today we talked about improving value, improving saleability, again, maximizing value, all these things. These are all great, right? But that only matters if you get there, right? The reality is, like, the longer we're on this earth, the higher the likelihood that we're going to be off this earth, right? Like, and that's just a reality. And whether it's death or injury or COVID, unforeseen scenarios that can create a disaster and ultimately lead to the death of our business. When we talk about de-risking our business, the benefit is not just more value when we sell and saleability. That the benefit is actually now, and I know that. So this is what you're obviously helping some people with too. I don't know what I'm doing on my side, Brandon, but
all good, all good, all good. Hey, let's take it from here. You'd say, I can edit that part out, see what happened. But say, there is, and I don't want to end on a dark note, but
yeah. So I don't want to end on a dark note, but I'm going to, because I think this is actually one of the most important things people need to realize. So today we've talked about when we sell the business and improving, maximizing value, improving saleability, and those things are all great and they're important, but they're only important if you get there. The reality is the longer we are on this earth, the higher the likelihood that we're going to be off this earth, right? We're all here for a finite amount of time. It all comes to an end. And that doesn't have to mean, so we're talking, that's alluding to death, but there's also just disability. I mean, I know of 2 clients personally. I'm helping one right now, who have had major accidents and can no longer run their business. And the reality is there's COVID, there's these outside disasters. There's, sometimes it could be for a family, it can be divorce, it could be disability, it can be death. Again, the more valuable you are to your business, well, if all of a sudden you can't run your business, what happens? And so I think the really important thing people need to realize is not, when we talk about de-risking a business, it's not just about benefit then. It actually really benefits us now. I mean, you're going to get a better lifestyle. Like most of us come into business with this dream of like one day the business kind of running without us. We've got the personal financial time and money freedom to, travel with our family and do all the things. Well, when you start taking these steps to get yourself out of the business and put in the systems, you start taking steps towards that life. And it actually is also keeping your business, your number one most valuable asset, probably safe from disruption. Nothing's perfectly safe, but safer because it doesn't rely on you, right? And so there is a real importance to this. There's some great benefits at the end if we can get there, but the real more important piece is actually now and considering, all these implications if something did go wrong.
Plus, a business that is worth selling is generally a fun business to run. So if you're putting in the systems in place and to sell it, generally you're going to get it to that point, and then you're like, maybe this is actually a lot better than the company that I've been running for 20 years. Things seem to be clicking right now, and things seem to be working.
One of the coolest things that we've seen is because there's times where an owner is a little bit more heavily involved maybe than they want to be, and they're like dragged down, like, I just want to retire, I'm so tired, and we're like, okay, well, we got to help you kind of take some steps out of this business. Because there was one person I'm thinking of in particular was doing a ton of administrative roles and tasks. And it's like, once we got that off her plate, she's like, oh my gosh, this business is fun again. It's just like rejuvenated that energy. Right. And so, there's tons of benefits to doing this stuff, as I know,
Love it. Rob, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. Really appreciate you. Where can people find you if they want to connect?
You can get me on my website. Would be the best place, fair-market.ca. On LinkedIn, just under my name, Rob Julien, and reach out if you got more questions. But Brandon, really appreciate you having me on here. I think this is a important topic that people need to think about far sooner than they realize, and so it's nice to be able to spread the message.
100%. Well, Rob, appreciate you, brother, and until next time. We'll see you then. But to our listeners that are still there, still with us, as always, appreciate you. Appreciate your time. We're here rooting for you to win. Until next time, have a great day. Cheers. Rock and roll. Stay blessed.